This is the 1-minute warning. Good morning. Sorry. Do you want to meet a celebrity? Yes. This is Soren. Oh, he's afraid. It's okay, bud. He's our, if you were here last week, he's our toddler evangelist. This is my 2-year-old son who smiled at an immigrant, and it opened up an opportunity to talk about Jesus. Can you say hi, Soren? Oh. Well, I'm sorry to embarrass you, buddy. But we're not talking about Soren today. We're talking about Jesus, so I'll put him back with his mom. Good morning. Today, we are on step number 2, or lesson number 2 of our topic of the mission. It's a lot based on a book I read called Joining Jesus on His Mission, and the way that I've been conducting my personal ministry at Wisconsin Lutheran College, where I'm the campus pastor. So it's good to be with you today. Today we're talking about your mission. Last week was Jesus' mission. Today we're talking about your mission. And today in worship we sing a hymn, and one of the stanzas, or maybe it's in the prayer, but we say it in worship today, that let all that I am, and all that I have, and all that I own, let it all serve. Let it all serve, but let it never serve any will but yours alone. That's what we say. Let all that I am, and all that I have, and all that I own, let it always serve your will. As baptized children of God. And that's a great way to talk about your mission. Your mission is to do whatever Jesus' mission is. At least as far as it comes to your life of faith as a baptized child of God, your mission is to do what Jesus' mission is. And the great news is He's already doing it. So that's what we're talking about today. Your mission is to recognize what Jesus is doing and join in and be part of the fun. As an introduction, you will have 30 seconds to name believers from history who had missions from God. I gave you 4 blanks on your handout. If you're missing a handout, they're up here. You can come get them. But you're going to have 30 seconds. I think you can come up with more than that. And I wonder if, as a group, we can come up with more than 5 believers from history who had missions. I'm going to start the 30-second clock now. Stop. That's it. That's it. What do we got? Can we come up with 5 as a group? Jonah had a mission from God. Well, he didn't like that mission at first, right? But God got it done one way or the other in spite of Jonah. Good one. Jonah had a mission from God. Samuel had a mission from God. Yeah, God said Samuel when he was asleep. Yep, and then he had a whole life as one of the last judges, one of the prophets. Yeah. That's 2. John the Baptist had a special mission. We talk about him today in the gospel reading for this morning. Abraham was called by God. Go to this land. God had work for him to do. Absolutely. Moses had a mission. He had a very special calling to that mission too, at the burning bush, right? And then he had big work for God to do through him. One more. Noah had a mission from God. Build the ark, right? Build the ark, absolutely. All right, same idea, but now take the word history out of it. Name believers that you know personally who have a mission from God. Now, these probably don't see a burning bush. These people probably didn't start by, getting summoned by the voice of God, right? But I'll bet you know some believers who have a mission from God. I'll give you 30 seconds to come up with some names. ready, set, go. And stop. That's 30 seconds. That's 30 seconds. Okay, understanding that the way people are called to their mission from God probably looks different from Moses, and it's a little different from Jonah going to Nineveh, and there probably aren't huge fish involved. But what are some believers you know who have a mission from God?
4 family members.
Family members are doing some of God's work. Absolutely. Absolutely. I am. Yeah, I am. Of course. In my formal work as a pastor at WLC, here as I'm serving as a little part-time thing on Sunday mornings, and even in my work with my family that I brought along today, right? Yeah, I'm serving on a couple different missions from God. Yeah. One more? Please.
At St. John's and all the ones past.
All the current pastors at St. John's and all the ones, if you look on the wall where all their pictures are, right? All those pastors too, yeah. So pastors certainly, and family members certainly, all believers in a certain sense are on a mission from God. So the next question is, how does an individual's mission, my mission, your family member's mission, how does an individual's mission fit into God's big mission? We'll probably have a hard time answering that before we review what is God's big mission, all right? So here's the way I talked about it last week. In Genesis chapter 1, everyone's with God. Like, you can say in his kingdom, you can say in his family, you can say they've got a great relationship with God. Adam and Eve, they love, they trust God, God loves them. They're all with God. Genesis chapter 3, right? Now we got people who are wandering from God, who are trying to get away from God. Some people want nothing to do with God. And all of a sudden that everybody's in the same big family, it starts to get a little fuzzier, and people are not in God's family. They're not with God. So, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, God comes and promises he's going to send somebody to remedy this. He's going to send somebody to fix this. And then when Jesus arrives on the scene, God is putting his plan in a brand new way. He's putting his plan into action to save the world. God's mission. If you saw that unfolding, if you saw people were with God and then they're not with God, what would you do? I said, if I was going to put words to God's mission, God came to seek and to save the lost. He came to redeem and restore creation. How would you say it? If you're God and you see, there's these people who are with God, then they're not with God. I want to go on a mission to help them, to fix something. How would you say it? What is God's mission? Please. Rescue. He's on a rescue mission to rescue people and eventually to rescue all creation and make it new. Mm-hmm. Another way to say it?
Here to restore us back to G1.
He's trying to get us back to G1, yeah. And if you follow the whole plot of the Bible, that's kind of how it goes. The last chapters of the Bible are this garden in heaven in Revelation and this beautiful city, just what God started with. He wants to get our creation back to that, and he's doing it. He's doing it. Okay, so with that in mind, what are some ways, list some ways, that an individual's mission can fit into God's big mission? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to throw out one idea at your table or with somebody you're sitting nearby. All right? 30 seconds, go for it. it up. All right, two thoughts. Let's get two thoughts on the table. What is one way, what are some ways that an individual's mission could fit into God's big mission? Jeff.
I don't know chapter and verse, but at some point it says good works prepared in advance for us to do.
Yeah. You don't even have to figure out how your mission fits into God's mission. God prepared your work in advance. God's the one who planned the good works in advance. That's from Ephesians chapter 2, right? That God saved us by His grace through faith. Yeah, you knew it. By grace through His faith, and then He made you special to do the good works that He planned in advance for you to do. God figured out how your work fits into His big plan. Absolutely He did. And that's not just your work telling about Jesus, right? That's your work as a husband. That's your work as a father. That's your work at your job. God has figured out lots of ways for you to be part of His plan to save the world. One more idea. How can an individual fit into God's big plan?
Care for other people, your neighbor.
You love and you care for other people. You care for your neighbor, and you are doing the work that God wants for them, and you get to be a part of it. Absolutely. When you love and you care for your neighbor. Absolutely. Well, God involved people in His mission in a very specific way. This is where we're headed. We had Jesus' mission last week, your mission this week. Next week we'll talk about how. Then we take a break for the State of the Parish event, address. And then in February, we'll talk about the partners we have in the mission. And then we'll debrief on how's it going. And we'll take some time to talk about how is this going as we put it into practice. And then on the last one, we'll talk about mission uncomfortable. Those uncomfortable situations that aren't your average loving and caring for your neighbor, that are more tricky if you're with somebody who's really hostile to Jesus' mission, or if you're with somebody who's way outside what we normally see at church, people from the LGBTQ community in particular, or like some atheist questions that might come up. That's where we're headed. But for today, we'll talk about how Jesus wants to involve you in His mission. Mark chapter 1, verse 17. I would like for everybody to read this except me. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, and then I'm not going to talk. You all are. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Jesus said that. He said that right after He was baptized, and He started His ministry, and He came up to fishermen, and He said that. He sent them on a mission trip. Have you ever been on a mission trip? Some have. One of my jobs at Wisconsin Lutheran College is to organize our mission trip program. Here's the dirty little secret of the mission trip program at Wisconsin Lutheran College. It only sort of helps the churches where we send students. Sometimes it's super useful to have 3 extra college students around to stuff envelopes or teach VBS. That is helpful, but it's way more useful for the 3 college students as they get to practice serving Jesus in all sorts of little ways. And what they experience on that mission trip is really the point. I'm fascinated to hear or see a show of hands. Who has like set aside a specific amount of time to either do something local or go somewhere in a different part of the U.S. or go overseas? Who has been on a mission trip before? Okay, we've got a fair number of people who have been on a mission trip. For those who haven't, I would like those of you who have been on a mission trip, what is something it's like? What is one thing you might experience or feel when you're on a mission trip? What is it like to be on a mission trip? Yeah.
You're really embraced by the congregation, like lots of hospitality and just treating you like royalty.
You're embraced by the congregation that you're going to serve. You're treated well there. Awesome. What else?
You can see the need why you need to get into the neighborhoods and find the people who may need it, and then later on, if you're fortunate enough to go back and see how God's hand was used.
Sure.
You really get to see the need for people who are looking for Jesus, even if maybe they don't know it. You see the need for those people, and then if you're lucky, you get to go back to that same location and see what God's doing there. Yeah, awesome.
First do it, it's uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the easier it gets.
First do it, it's uncomfortable, but the more you do it, it gets easier. Yeah. How? Yeah, absolutely. The uncomfortability of just thinking in terms of like, I'm going to be a spokesman for Jesus. Is that what you're thinking?
Out to other people that don't know. I mean, at first you're nervous about it, and that you realize as soon as you start having success, it makes it all easier for the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as you've done it a few times, it makes it easier each successive time. Absolutely. One more thing that's like what it's like to be on a mission trip.
It's inspiring, especially if you go to a smaller congregation than what you have, just the enthusiasm that people have.
It's inspiring. Inspiring. I like that. You see the enthusiasm of those people and you see the work that there is to do, which can be intimidating, but also you get to be part of it. Absolutely. You know, there is part of me that wants to keep sending Wisconsin Lutheran College students far away to go mission trips to Florida and to go to the Caribbean and to go to Africa, partly because that's where they want to go. But there's another part of me that wants to stop funding mission trips outside the state of Wisconsin. Not because we don't have money. I want to stop sending mission trips outside the state of Wisconsin because we got work to do here, right? Now, we're not going to do that. We're going to look for ways to do both, right? That's what we're actually going to do. But you see what I'm saying? Like, you know, a couple decades ago, our Wisconsin Synod leaders decided and looked around the world and said, hey, we need to send missionaries to a foreign country. They sent some missionaries to Africa. They sent some missionaries to Native American reservations here in the U.S., right? They sent places. Why would they make that decision? They looked around the world and they said, we need to send missionaries to, let's say, Zambia because the people there need them, right? Well, I look around Milwaukee and I'm like, same thing, right? Same thing. We need to send missionaries to Milwaukee, to Wauwatosa, to Menominee Falls because the people there need them, right? Because the people there need them. And that's kind of all we're doing. All we're doing when we say, what's your mission, is to say, imagine you're on a mission trip, now don't buy a plane ticket. That's it. Imagine you're on a mission trip, then don't buy a plane ticket, and you're doing it. And you're doing the mission. And I wonder if all the things we said, if being inspired by what you see around you, if being uncomfortable at first and then it gets easier, if getting a chance to first plant the seed and then hopefully get a chance to see what God does with the initial work you do. I wonder if all those things could happen without us taking time off work, without us, putting a whole new thing on a meeting at church on our calendar, without us going to a far-flung place or even traveling for spring break. We just do our lives and we keep our eyes open for those things. That's all we're saying when we say it's your mission. So now you know the whole Bible study, and you could leave now, and then you'd be good. But I prepared more slides, so let's keep going. I told you last week that I would ask you this question. Now, some of you weren't here, right? But if you were here, there's no excuse for you not having an answer to this question. No, okay. I said I'll ask you, in the past week, what did you notice Jesus doing? This guy was paying attention last week. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
A snowstorm has a way of bringing people in contact. So when we're all out shoveling, we talk to neighbors that we don't usually talk to. We have a neighbor who's in our 70s, and Sebastian helped her shovel her driveway. We helped jumpstart someone's car. So Jesus sent a snowstorm.
I love it. Jesus sent the snowstorm, and it does have a way of bringing people together, right? You meet your neighbors in a way you didn't used to meet them when you got to shovel 3 feet of snow. Absolutely. Way to go, Sebastian. Way to be part of what Jesus is doing by helping him shovel out. That's awesome. That's awesome. What else? What else did you notice Jesus doing? Well, you know what's funny? When there's a huge catastrophic weather event, what do the insurance companies call it? An act of God. That's not the way they're thinking of it, the way I'm thinking of it. But hey, it's still fun. What else did you notice Jesus doing this week? Please.
In Pick and Save. They allowed me to tell the redheaded Barbie that she was the subject of our Bible class.
Yes! Barbie. Was she? She's so good. Barbie at Pick and Save is so good. She's great at being a neighbor, isn't she? She's great at loving the people around her. I'm glad that. Yeah, and so you got to talk to her about Bible class. That's amazing. That's amazing. Awesome. Well, I got another assignment for you at the end of today, but we got to get through the lesson before we get there. So here's the goal. By 10:15, we'll be able to recognize more what Jesus is doing, and we'll be more prepared to join in, right? If last week our goal was have our eyes open, this week our goal is recognize what it is, and then think about what it would be like to be part of it and join in. So we're flipping the page. Letter B is at the top of page 2. What does the kingdom of God look like? And I think we probably have to answer this in 2 phases. First of all, what does the kingdom of God look like among Christians? We are all Christians here, at least that's what we're telling each other, and I believe you. And so what does it look like when God is up to something among Christians? Well, the Augsburg Confession was written by Philip Melanchthon, and here's what he said. The church is the assembly of saints in which the gospel is taught purely and the sacraments are administered rightly. I'm going to interpret that into the language of our Bible study. When you see somebody talking about God's word, when you see baptism, when you see Holy Communion, Jesus is up to something. He's redeeming and restoring. He's seeking and saving the world. That's what it looks like in church when God is on the move. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 to 23 says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. You recognize that comes at the end of the book of Galatians because the whole first part of the book of Galatians is about what Jesus has done for us in the gospel. When you have received God's word purely taught and you've received the sacraments, Jesus is doing something to your heart. And the way it comes out of you is not that you go and do more baptism and administer Holy Communion. The way that Jesus' work in your heart comes out is in these ways, the fruits of the Spirit. That's what it looks like when Jesus is up to something in your life. It's when you have those attributes, the fruits of the Spirit. John chapter 13 says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. That's what Jesus doing something in church looks like. People loving each other. People bringing grapes to Bible class because that's nice and it's a way to show love. And people laughing and joking before class to cheer up somebody who had a rough week or helping your neighbor shovel out of their driveway. Right? This is what it looks like, that you love one another. That's what it looks like inside the group of believers when Jesus is on the move. But what does it look like? What does the mission of Jesus look like among people who aren't Christian yet? What does Jesus' mission look like among pre-Christians? And I got a one-word answer for you. It's need. It looks like need. Jesus is up to something when people need all the things that Jesus is doing among believers. When people need to hear the gospel purely proclaimed and to receive the sacraments, that's Jesus is up to something. When you see people need a little love or joy or peace or patience or kindness or goodness or gentleness or self-control, then Jesus is doing something in their lives. When people need to feel the love that you guys feel here at Bible class and at St. John's, then Jesus is up to something in that person's life. So, what are some examples? I'm going to set you loose for a couple minutes here. Don't read you can read, but we're not working on the italicized paragraph on page 2. We're working on the examples. So in the middle of the page there it says, the need for the gospel. Give me an example of what that looks like. The need for joy. What does that look like if you see it in somebody who's not Christian? The need for peace. What does that look like? The need for love. What's an example of that? Work with people around you. I'm going to give you a full 60 seconds. See if you can sort out what does it look like when people need these various things. Ready, set, go. All right. So I'm going to ask you to share. I'm going to ask you to share an example of what does it look like when somebody needs something that we have in the kingdom of God. I'm going to ask you to share that. But after you give me the example, I'm going to ask the whole group, if Jesus met somebody like your example, not what would he do? Because Jesus has ability to do things that you and I don't have the ability to do, right? What would he think? What would Jesus be thinking if he met somebody like the example that you give me? Now, you don't have to answer if you give the example, so you're not on the hook to answer 2 questions, just give me the example. But I'm going to ask the whole group, what would that be like, okay? So, who has an example of what need looks like before people are in the kingdom of God? For any of those different things. Somebody is lonely. Somebody is lonely. They need something that we have in the God's kingdom. If Jesus met somebody who's lonely, what would he think? I need to put somebody in their life. Yeah, he wants them to be with somebody. What's another example of need in pre-Christians? Trouble. Somebody's in trouble. What would Jesus think if he met somebody in trouble? I need to provide them some sort of safety. Yeah, maybe that's what he would think. What's another thing that need can look like in pre-Christian people?
Who's gone through a lot of tragedies.
They've gone through a lot of tragedies. Maybe they feel worn down. I'm thinking of a specific person right now because I have somebody like that in my life. If Jesus met somebody who's been through a lot of tragedies, what would he think? I would like for this person to have comfort. Yeah, yeah. Now, what Jesus can do is miracles, and I can't do that. But I can think like Jesus, right? I can try to see what is Jesus doing, and how can I be part of it? I asked you to think what Jesus is thinking, which is in some ways an impossible question, right? You don't know what Jesus would be thinking. You don't know. But look at this paragraph. This is from the book that sparked a lot of these ideas in me. It's from Joining Jesus on His Mission. It's written out in italics on your page. I'm going to read it off the screen. It says, seeing what Jesus is showing us in our daily lives is not done through magic or mysticism. You don't have to be a Jesus mind reader, okay? It's done through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. By reading the Gospels over and over again, we can watch what Jesus has already shown us. And we can listen to what Jesus has already told us. What Jesus did in the Gospels, he is still doing today. What Jesus said in the Gospels, he is still saying today. The more we watch and listen to Jesus in the Gospels, the more we recognize what we are seeing and hearing from him in our daily lives. This has really transformed the way I read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. All right? Now, let's be clear. The point of the Gospels is not to teach you how to talk to your neighbor. That's not the point of the Gospels. The point of the Gospels is to show you what Jesus did for you. But if you look at that and then you find yourself talking to a neighbor who also needs something that you also needed at one time, boy, are you ready to take what you learned from Jesus and apply it to your neighbor without having to read Jesus' mind. You're not reading Jesus' mind. You're reading Jesus' story. You read his story, and you know what he's like. And you know how to respond to people who need him, right? We're going to do it. We're going to do that. We're going to read a section of the Gospels. Some of you have an insert in your handout that has the story of Nicodemus on it and the story of the adulterous woman on it. Others of you have an insert that has the story of Zacchaeus on it and the story of the rich young ruler on it. All right? You don't all have the same insert. That's fine. Your job is to read one of those with another person. Find somebody who's with it. Pick one and read it out loud. It's going to be very loud in here. That's good. That's what we like. Read it out loud. And when you finish reading it, I want you to compose what would Jesus have written in his journal at the end of that day. Jesus goes, I don't think he had a journal because paper was really expensive, right? But imagine he did. Imagine he had the iPhone with the new journaling app, which I love, and he goes home and Jesus is going to write a little summary of what happened today. Where was my head at today? Jesus is going to pour out his heart about the story that you read. What would he put in there? Okay? I'm going to set you loose. Find a buddy, read one of the stories, and write Jesus' journal entry. seconds. All right, let's bring it back to the big group. Let's bring it back to the big group. If you read and talked about Zacchaeus, please stand up. Okay. Of the people standing, one of you will tell me what is something that Jesus might have written in his journal at the end of the day. Please.
It's okay to go outside of the normal society circle because those people need to hear about me too.
It's okay to go to people outside normal society circle because those people need to hear about me too. Awesome. Have a seat. Have a seat. Okay, please, go ahead.
I couldn't believe he was up in a tree.
I can't believe he was in a tree. This guy. How short is this guy? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you see what we're going to do here, right? If you read about the rich young ruler, please stand up. Whoa! All right, pressure's on. What is something Jesus might have written?
What's impossible for man, God can do. So don't worry. What seems impossible is not impossible for God.
Oh, I love it. Just focus on what's in front of you. You don't have to do the whole thing. That's impossible. God can do the impossible. Great. Have a seat. Have a seat. If you read about Nicodemus, then you are a reader because that's the longest reading by far. Please stand up if you read about Nicodemus. All right. We got a lot of readers in here. What is something Jesus might have said or written in his journal at the end of the Nicodemus day? Although that was in the middle of the night, so maybe it's like the next day after that. I don't know. What would he write in his journal?
Today I told a Pharisee who believed that he needed to follow the strict observance of the law in order to be made righteous, that he really only needed faith in me.
I told a Pharisee who thought he needed to obey the whole law, I told him that he really only needed me. That's beautiful. Somebody else have an insight that you're like, maybe he wrote this? Beautiful. That pretty much captured it all. Sir, please.
Pharisee clearly wasn't paying attention during seminary class.
This guy, maybe he didn't have professors as good as you, you know? All right, have a seat, have a seat. He wasn't paying attention during seminary, that's good. And if you read about the adulterous woman, please stand up. Now, what is something Jesus might have written after a day like that? People lacked forgiveness yet again, so Jesus stepped in with forgiveness. Absolutely. Other thoughts? I don't want to cut anybody off. Yeah, please.
I found it interesting that people were trying to trick him because, he knows everything. So, why try that?
They were trying to trick me again, and I know everything, so it was a little pointless. Yeah, maybe he was wondering about the hearts of those people who were trying to trick him. Absolutely.
He wrote in his diary or his journal what he was writing on the ground.
Maybe he wrote what he was writing on the ground. Yeah, I don't know what he wrote. Maybe we'll have to ask him someday. Yeah. Very cool. Have a seat. Have a seat. At this point in our time together, all I want you to be able to do is to see if you pay attention to what Jesus did, and we have it in black and white writing, you can start to see what Jesus might be doing in the lives of people around us. Okay? Let's flip over and say, what does it look like to join in? What does it look like to join in with that? Here I've got rapid-fire quotes from the book, from Joining Jesus on His Mission by Greg Finke, and one quote from his wife Susan, which I found in later research about their ministry. Rapid fire, and at the end of each rapid fire quote, I'm going to ask you, why is that a relief as you think about joining in with what Jesus is doing? First quote, if someone is ready for a little hope or grace, they don't need us turning on our Jesus hose and spraying them down with everything we know. The next line he says, they just need us to offer a cool cup of water of Jesus, not a fire hose of Jesus. Why is that a relief? Let's do this. Stop. Let's do this. If you have a pencil, this is a writing time. Write. Why that's a relief to you. If you don't have a pencil, try to remember what you thought. All right, I'll grab your attention again. If you're still writing, feel free to keep writing, but I'll talk over you. Jesus, this is what I think of. Okay? You're ready to do a little hope, a little grace, cup of cool water, Jesus. You're ready. You're in Bible class right now, okay? You like Jesus, I can tell. And you know about him, I can tell. And you're ready to do it. Here's my example. Jesus, this is Mark chapter 5. Jesus goes across the sea, and he is greeted on the shore by a demon-possessed man, a man with an unclean spirit. The man is naked. He has cuts all over his body. He is the terror of the town. They chain him in a cave so that he can't get away, and that's where he lives, although he breaks the chains because he's superhuman strength because of the demon. Anyways, Jesus casts the demon out. It's a famous story. And the man says, please, 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 can I come with you? I want to be on a mission with you. And Jesus says, no, you've got a story to tell right here at your home. And then Jesus took a Post-it out of his pocket and said, here are directions to Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary. And if you just enroll for 4 short years, you too can be a missionary for me. No, this man had one Bible story in his Bible, and it was the one that happened to him. And Jesus is like, yeah, you're ready, go. Go tell what I'm like. Go tell what I've done. And he was the one guy in town who then loved Jesus. You don't need to have all of the Bible passages memorized and all of the doctrines right. You just need to be able to share what Jesus has done for you, right? Next quote. The quote says, if someone is 100 steps away from Jesus, on like a hypothetical timeline where Jesus has the plot of their life, they're going to meet Jesus in 100 steps, they are not ready for the Jesus step just yet. They're probably ready for the next step. We need to remember that the next step is just as important as the final step on their journey. You see what he's saying? If you don't say, and Jesus is Lord, and if you don't believe in him right now, you might end up in hell forever. You don't have to say that every time, because they're maybe not at that step, right? Maybe they're at a step that comes before that. Why is that a relief? Write it down or spend some time pondering. Why is that a relief? All right, I got another quote for you. I'll wrap up your writing here. This quote says this. It's talking about Jesus and Nicodemus. It says, I call the kind of friendship Jesus offered Nicodemus agenda-less friendship. Agenda-less friendship is authentic friendship offered simply for the sake of being friends before any assurance can be given that the friend will come to faith. All right, so Jesus met with Nicodemus in John chapter 3, near the beginning of the story, and we don't know how it ended. Like, it's not like, and then Nicodemus is like, I will be one of your disciples, and it was all happy. It doesn't say that. It's just like they talked, and then Jesus goes away. Then, way later in the story, Nicodemus, we find him doing things that a disciple would do. He takes care of Jesus' body after the crucifixion, right? So, but Jesus wasn't like, I will only invest in this man. I will only stay up all night talking to him if I know he's going to come to faith. He just did it, right? He offered a friendship without an agenda, Why is that a relief? You can have a friendship without having the agenda of, I need to know they'll come to faith. All right, I got the last quote. The last quote for you. It says, when we see a neighbor's need for a little grace in our neighbor's lives, we do not need to solve their problems or fix what's broken. That's Jesus' job. You don't need to solve their problem or fix what's broken. That's Jesus' job, which means your job must be something else. Why is that a relief? Wrap up your writing here. All right. So what we're about to do is hypothetically, right, go through some hypothetical situations where you might join in with what Jesus is doing. And what I've tried to give you is 4 things that you don't really need to do, right? The first quote is, you don't really need to tell them everything you know about Jesus. The second quote says, you don't need to get to the whole end of their faith story in the first time you're chatting, or the second, or the third, or the fifth, right? The third one is, you don't have to have an agenda like, I will convert you to come to my church or something. You don't have to have that agenda to be a friend. And the fourth one is, you don't have to fix their problem to be a good friend. You don't have to fix their problem to be a good friend. With those 4 things in mind, I would like to know how you'd respond to these people. People like Zach. Zach uses the same gym as you for years, and he's obviously wealthy, but he feels unfulfilled. How would you join in? Or like the Ademus family. The Ademus family lives next door, and their 20-year-old Nick Ademus has questions about spirituality. How would you join in with a 20-year-old who has questions about spirituality? Or the rich young jeweler who has a daughter at St. John's School, and he's very moral. He's very upright. He grew up in the Mormon church, and so he is a great neighbor, and he obeys God's law as best he can, and yet he still feels far from God. How would you join in with what Jesus is doing? Or the vulgarous woman. A vulgarous woman at work often shares her wild party stories, and then one day she's crying in the bathroom. How do you join in? Pick one of those. Maybe one whose name sounds like the person you read about earlier today. I don't know. Pick one of those. And at your table, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to chat about how might you join in, and if you get stuck, maybe go back to those top questions, what you don't have to do to join in. Ready, go. All right, wrap it up. Wrap up your chat. All right, I'm going to do the same thing we did before. Go but one by one, and I'll ask if you talked about them just to raise your hand. And when I do, I want you to tell me not something that you thought, something you heard. Tell me something you heard somebody else say that you thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. All right? So if you did all the talking, joke's on you. You can't talk in front of the whole group. One of your friends will. No. Tell me something you heard. First, who talked about Zach? All right. What did you hear somebody else say you might be able to do to join in? Show some concern. Zach is obviously feeling unfulfilled. He's distraught. Show a little concern. Now, I got to say, if you do that, that's the wrong thing to do, okay? If you do that, Jesus is going to be sitting there like, you blew my whole plan. I can't believe you did that. Now I have no chance of saving Zach. Of course not, right? There's nothing you could do that would totally derail Jesus' plan, right? You should show concern. And if that turns out to be the wrong thing, Jesus will figure it out, right? But you can hop in if you think that's what's great. And I think that's a great idea, right? Show some concern. I can't think of a situation where showing concern isn't the right thing to do, but yes, great. Another one? What could you do for Zach?
I heard somebody say invite him to church.
Him to church, yeah. That's a simple way to maybe expose him to even more things that could give him hope. Yeah.
You know him from the gym, but you could get to know him outside of the gym as friends.
Get to know him more outside of the gym. Yeah, maybe he's one of those lonely people, right? And he wants a friend. What about Nicodemus? Who read or talked about Nicodemus? What is something that you heard somebody say, hey, you could try this. You could do this to join in with what Jesus is doing? Yeah. Say, I'm happy to hear your questions. If I don't know, I'll just tell you I don't know, right? But I can try to answer your questions as best I can. Absolutely.
Engage him in questions. He's got questions, ask him questions.
You could ask him questions. Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. And that's it. You know, we don't have to get to the end of the faith story, right? It's not like, and then that'll solve his problem. That's not the point, right? You just join in. You see what happens. What about the rich young jeweler who has a daughter who goes to St. John's School? The rich young jeweler. He's very moral, but he doesn't quite feel close to God. Who read about that? Who talked about that? The rich young jeweler. A couple people. What might you do?
If it's a very moral person, sometimes they might want to be involved in some kind of like volunteer activity or something. So maybe offering to do some volunteer activity or maybe like a benefit run or something like that with them. So you have an opening to...
I love it. I can see you really care about people and you care about our community. I want to be part of that too. Can we do a benefit run together? Can we do a charity thing together? That's a great idea. It's a great idea. Awesome. And the last one is the vulgarous woman. I'm not thinking of a specific vulgarous colleague I have at Wisconsin Lutheran College. That's not based on reality. I don't have any of those. But if you imagine one, what might you do? Yeah.
Ask her if she wants to talk to you. Just make her feel seen and tell her she matters. Because chances are the reason why she's living that way is because she wants to feel seen and feel that she matters.
Yeah, it might be. She feels unseen. She feels like she doesn't matter. So just letting her know you're there for her, letting her know you see her, and you're there if she wants to talk. That's awesome. Beautiful. We don't have to have all the conclusive answers here. That's not the point of this study. It's just ways that we might be able to join in. Here's what I'll ask you to do. We got about 1 minute left. We might not even have a minute left. We do have 1 minute left. What's one insight you had today? All that I'm trying to do is say we talked about a bajillion little things. What's one insight you had today? Jot it down. Or if you don't have a pen, share it with a friend. Go for it. All right, we're at 10:15. So I'm just going to give you a heads up what I'm going to ask you next week, all right? Next week I'm going to ask you this question. What opportunities did you have to join in with Jesus' mission this week? I'm going to ask you that. And you get to say the opportunity even if you didn't take it, all right? I'm sure I'm going to bring one of those in my story. I'm going to say, I had this opportunity and I was too chicken, and that's okay. But I'm saying, what opportunities did you have to join in? I'm going to ask you that next week. God bless you and keep you. I'll see you next Sunday morning.